They laughed when she served their coffee. They sneered when she took their orders. Belle was invisible, a runaway nobody hiding in a backwater cafe. But when the most powerful man in the realm walked through that door and declared she was the one he'd been hunting for 3 years, everything shattered. The girl they mocked? She was royalty. The throne they thought was lost? It was hers by blood. And the stepbrother who wanted her dead? He was already sending his hunters. If you want to see how a forgotten waitress becomes a queen, and how the king who found her changes everything, stay until the very end. Drop a like, tell us what city you're watching from, and let's dive into Belle's story. Belle's hands trembled as she wiped down the corner table for the 3rd time that morning. The wood grain had long since memorized the circular motion of her rag, the same way her body had memorized every step, every routine, every safe, predictable moment inside the honeyed crescent cafe. 3 years. 3 years of invisible safety. The morning crowd filtered in like clockwork, merchants arguing over grain prices, seamstresses gossiping about the mayor's wife, dock workers nursing hangovers with black coffee and stale bread. Belle moved between them like a ghost, her copper-brown hair tucked beneath a faded kerchief, her eyes downcast, her voice barely above a whisper when she took orders. "More coffee, Belle," old Henrik barked from table 4, not bothering to look up from his newspaper. "Right away," she murmured, already moving. "Girl's slower than molasses," someone muttered. Laughter rippled through the room. Belle's cheeks burned, but she said nothing. She never said anything. That was the whole point. Invisibility was survival. Silence was safety. And the honeyed crescent, with its chipped paint and perpetually sticky floors, was the only sanctuary she'd ever known. She refilled Henrik's cup without meeting his eyes, then retreated to the kitchen. Mara, the cook, glanced up from the stove. "You're doing it again," Mara said, not unkindly. "Doing what?" "Disappearing." Mara pointed her wooden spoon at Belle. "One of these days you're going to fade right through the floorboards." Belle managed a weak smile. "Maybe that's the plan." "Mm-hmm." Mara turned back to her eggs. "Just remember, you can't run from everything forever." Belle's smile evaporated. "If only you knew." The bell above the door chimed. Belle grabbed the coffee pot and pushed back through the swinging kitchen door, ready to greet another faceless regular, another mundane order, another... She froze. The entire cafe had gone silent. A man stood in the doorway, and he was wrong. Not wrong in an obvious way, no weapon drawn, no threatening posture, but wrong in the way a wolf is wrong in a hen house. Wrong in the way a storm is wrong on a clear day. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark traveling clothes that were too fine for this part of town, but not ostentatious enough to scream wealth. His black hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been riding hard. But it was his eyes that made Belle's blood run cold, pale gray, sharp as winter ice, and utterly, terrifyingly focused. On her. "Table's full, Bo," Henrik called out, breaking the silence. "Try the place down the street." The stranger didn't even glance at him. He walked straight toward the corner. Toward the corner, the table beneath the window, the one with the view of the square and the best light and the... "That table's reserved," Belle heard herself say. Her voice came out stronger than she'd intended, and several heads turned in surprise. The man stopped. Slowly, deliberately, he looked at her. Really looked at her, in a way that made her feel stripped bare, as if every carefully constructed layer of invisibility was peeling away under that gaze. "Reserved," he repeated, his voice low and smooth, with an accent she couldn't quite place. "For whom?" "The Duke of Renly," Belle said, lifting her chin slightly. "He sits there every morning at 9. "Does he?" The corner of the man's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "How unfortunate for the Duke!" He pulled out the chair and sat down. The cafe erupted. "Hey!" Henrik half rose from his seat. "The girl said it's reserved." "You can't just..." another patron began, but the stranger raised one hand and the protest died in their throats. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply existed with such undeniable authority that argument became impossible. Belle's heart hammered against her ribs. She should walk away. She should get Mara, or Henrik, or literally anyone else to deal with this. Instead, she found herself stepping closer, the coffee pot still clutched in her white-knuckled grip. "The Duke won't be pleased," she said quietly. The Duke, the man replied, his eyes never leaving hers, has been summoned to the capital on urgent business. He left 2 hours ago. He won't be returning to this table or this town for quite some time. Belle's stomach dropped. How do you know that? Because I summoned him. The words hung in the air like smoke. Around them, the cafe had gone from shocked to fascinated. This was better than theater, better than the gossip columns, better than anything that had happened in this sleepy river town in months. Who are you? Belle whispered. The stranger leaned back in his chair, studying her with unsettling intensity. My name is Theon, and I've been looking for you for a very long time, Belle. The coffee pot slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. No one moved, no one breathed. Belle's mind raced, tripping over itself. He knows my name. He knows my name. How does he know my name? She'd been so careful. 3 years of tips pocketed in silence, of rooms rented under false names, of never ever letting anyone get close enough to ask questions. I think you have me confused with someone else, she managed, her voice barely steady. Do I? Theon tilted his head slightly. Belle Ashcroft, 23 years old, fled the capital 3 years ago after the death of your father, Lord Cassian Ashcroft, and disappeared without a trace. You've been working here under the name Belle Winters for 2 years and 7 months. You live in a room above the chandler's shop on Copper Street. You walk to work the long way every morning because you're afraid of the main road. You— Stop! Belle's voice cracked. Just stop! But Theon didn't stop. He stood, and the movement was so fluid, so controlled, that it sent a fresh wave of fear through her. You think if you stay small enough, quiet enough, invisible enough, the world will forget you exist, he continued, his voice soft but relentless. But you're not invisible, Belle. You never were. And the people hunting you? They're getting closer every day. I don't know what you're talking about, Belle said desperately, backing toward the kitchen. I don't know who you are or what you want, but you need to leave. Right now. Belle, leave! The shout echoed through the cafe. Henrik was on his feet now, along with 2 of the dock workers. Theon glanced at them, and something flickered in his expression, not fear, but something like resignation. I'm not your enemy, he said quietly, his eyes still on Belle. But if I can find you, so can they. And when they do, this place, he gestured at the cafe, at the people staring at them, won't protect you. Nothing will, except me. I don't need your protection, Belle spat, though her hands were shaking so hard she had to clasp them behind her back. I don't need anything from you. For a long moment, Theon said nothing. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather-bound book. He set it on the table. When you're ready to stop running, he said, you'll find me at the Thorn and Crown Inn, room 7. I'll wait 3 days. After that, he paused, his jaw tightening. After that, you're on your own. And I hope, for both our sakes, that you survive what's coming. He turned and walked out. The bell chimed. The door closed. And Belle stood frozen in the wreckage of her carefully constructed life, staring at the book on the table like it was a coiled snake. The cafe exploded into chatter the moment Theon was gone. Who in the frozen hell was that? Henrik demanded. Did you see his boots? Those were military grade. Said he summoned the Duke. Belle, are you in some kind of trouble? Belle ignored them all. She walked to the table on numb legs and picked up the book. It was small, bound in dark leather, with no title or marking on the cover. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The first page was a single sentence, written in elegant script. The truth is rarely kind, but it is always necessary. She turned the page, and her world ended. It was a genealogy, a family tree, meticulously detailed, stretching back generations. At the top, House Ashcroft, royal line of the Northern Realm. Her eyes traced downward, past names she half remembered from childhood stories, past branches that had withered and died until she reached the bottom. Cassian Ashcroft, Lord of the Northern Reach, deceased, and beneath that in fresh ink, Belle Ashcroft, last living heir. The book slipped from her hands. No, she whispered. No, no, no. But the truth didn't care about her denial. It was there in black ink, in careful handwriting, in bloodlines that couldn't be erased no matter how far she ran or how deep she hid. She wasn't just Belle the waitress, she was Belle Ashcroft. And if this book was right, if Theon was right, she wasn't just the last of her line. She was royalty. Belle didn't remember closing the cafe early. She didn't remember the walk back to her room, or locking the door, or collapsing onto the narrow bed that had been her entire world for nearly 3 years. All she remembered was the book. She'd brought it with her, stupid, dangerous, reckless, but she couldn't leave it behind. Now it sat on the rickety table by the window, and she stared at it like it might explode. Outside, the sun climbed higher. The market vendors called their wares. Life continued, oblivious and ordinary. Belle's hands shook as she opened the book again. The genealogy was just the beginning. Page after page detailed the history of House Ashcroft, their holdings, their alliances, their power. And then, near the end, the tone shifted. The handwriting became sharper, more urgent. 3 years ago, Lord Cassian Ashcroft was found dead in his study. Official cause: heart failure. True cause: poison, administered by persons unknown. Belle's breath caught. Her father. Poisoned. Within hours, Lady Marguerite Ashcroft, Cassian's second wife, claimed regency on behalf of her son, Dominic Ashcroft. She declared Belle Ashcroft missing, presumed dead. The Northern Lords accepted this without question. They should not have. Belle Ashcroft is the legitimate heir by blood. Dominic Ashcroft is Marguerite's son from a previous marriage. No true claim to the Ashcroft line. But with Belle gone, he can claim the inheritance, the land, the title, and most critically, the throne. Belle's vision blurred. The throne. Her father had always talked about it in hushed, careful tones. The ancient seat of the northern realm. The power that came with it, the responsibility. He'd never pushed her toward it, never demanded she prepare for leadership. He'd wanted her to be safe. And now he was dead. Murdered. And his murderer was living in his house, ruling in his name, and hunting his daughter to tie up the last loose end. Belle slammed the book shut, her chest heaving. No, she said aloud, to the empty room, to the ghost of her father, to the universe itself. I'm not doing this. I don't want this. But want had nothing to do with it. The knock on her door made her jump. Belle? Mara's voice. You in there, honey? Belle's throat tightened. Yeah, I'm fine. You don't sound fine. Can I come in? Not right now, Mara, please. A long pause. Then, that man at the cafe, do you know him? No. Belle, I said no. Belle squeezed her eyes shut. I don't know him, I don't know what he wants, and I don't want to talk about it. Please, Mara, just leave me alone. Another pause. Then, quietly, if you need help, you know where to find me. Footsteps retreated down the hall. Belle sagged against the door, tears burning behind her eyelids. Mara had been kind to her. One of the few people in this town who'd bothered to see past the quiet, nervous girl with the downcast eyes. And now Belle was lying to her, shutting her out, because what else could she do? The truth is rarely kind, but it is always necessary. Belle looked at the book again. Theon had left her 3 days. 3 days to decide whether to keep running or to face the nightmare she'd been fleeing since the night her father died. 3 days to figure out if she was brave enough or foolish enough to walk into that inn and ask the stranger how he knew her secrets. 3 days before the hunters caught up. The Thorn and Crown Inn sat on the edge of town, where the cobblestones gave way to dirt roads and the river bent south toward the capital. Belle had walked past it 100 times and never gone inside. It was too expensive, too conspicuous, the kind of place where merchants stayed when they were passing through, where coin flowed freely and questions were asked. Now, as the sun dipped low on the second day, Belle stood across the street and stared at the painted sign swaying in the breeze. Room 7. She'd tried to forget. She'd gone to work, served coffee, cleaned tables, smiled at the regulars who'd already forgotten about the strange man who'd disrupted their morning. But the book sat in her room like a ticking clock, and every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father's face. Poisoned. By Marguerite. By Dominic. And they thought she was dead. They wanted her dead. Belle's hands clenched into fists. She crossed the street. The inn's common room was warm and loud, filled with the smell of roasted meat and cheap ale. A few heads turned as she entered, but most ignored her, just another tired worker ending a long day. The stairs creaked under her weight. Room 7 was at the end of the hall, the door slightly ajar. Belle knocked. "Come in." Theon's voice. Low, calm, utterly unsurprised. Belle pushed the door open. The room was simple. A bed, a chair, a small desk cluttered with maps and papers. Theon stood by the window, his back to her, silhouetted against the dying light. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said without turning. "I wasn't sure either," Belle admitted. Her voice sounded small in the quiet room. Theon turned. In the dim light, his features were sharper, more severe, but his eyes held something she hadn't expected. Sadness. "You read the book," he said. It wasn't a question. Belle nodded. "Then you know what you are, and you know why they want you dead." "My stepmother killed my father." The words tasted like ash. "And Dominic, my stepbrother, he's been ruling in my place, pretending I'm gone." "Not pretending," Theon corrected quietly. "Believing. Marguerite told him you died the same night as your father. He thinks the throne is his by right. But it's not." "No." Theon's gaze was steady, unflinching. "It's yours." Belle laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "I don't want a throne. I don't want any of this. I just want—" Her voice cracked. "I just wanted to survive." "You have," Theon said. "For 3 years, against impossible odds, you've survived. But survival isn't enough anymore, Belle. Not when they're coming for you." "You keep saying that." Belle took a shaky breath. "Who's coming? How do you know?" Theon moved to the desk and picked up a letter. He held it out to her. Belle took it with trembling fingers. The seal at the bottom was broken, but she recognized the crest, 2 ravens circling a crown, the royal seal of the Northern Realm. The letter was brief. "To Lord Theon Aldrich Ashford III, King of the Southern Reaches, your offer of alliance is noted and rejected. The Northern Realm has no need of Southern interference. However, if you have knowledge of the location of Belle Ashcroft, traitor and fugitive, you are commanded to deliver her to the capital for trial. Failure to comply will be considered an act of war. Signed, Regent Dominic Ashcroft." The letter fluttered from Belle's hands. "You're the king," she whispered. "You're the king, and you—" "And I told Dominic to go to hell," Theon finished calmly. 3 days ago, when he sent that letter, which is why I came here myself." Belle's mind reeled. King. Theon wasn't just some nobleman or hired hunter. He was the ruler of the southern half of the realm, the man whose armies could flatten cities, whose word was law across 1,000 miles. And he'd come personally to find her. Why? The question came out as a rasp. "Why would you risk war for me? You don't even know me." Theon's expression softened. Just a fraction, but enough. "I know more than you think," he said quietly. "Your father and I were acquainted. He wrote to me years ago, when you were still a child. He was worried about Marguerite, about what she might do if he died. He asked me to look after you, if anything happened to him." Belle's throat tightened. He knew. He knew she'd kill him. He suspected. But by the time I received his last letter, it was too late. He was dead, and you were gone. Theon's jaw tightened. "I've been looking for you ever since, and now that I've found you—" "Now that you've found me, what?" Belle demanded, her fear boiling into anger. "You expect me to march into the capital and declare myself queen? You think they'll just hand over the throne because I have the right bloodline?" "No," Theon said simply. "I expect them to try to kill you, just like they killed your father." The bluntness of it stole her breath. "But," Theon continued, stepping closer, "you won't be alone. You'll have me, my armies, my resources, and most importantly," his eyes locked onto hers, "you'll have the truth. Marguerite's treachery, Dominic's lies, all of it, exposed." Belle shook her head, backing away. "I can't. I'm not strong enough for this. I'm just a waitress. I'm nobody." "You're not nobody." Theon's voice was firm, almost fierce. "You're Belle Ashcroft, daughter of Cassian, last of the royal line. And whether you claim it or not, that throne is yours." "I don't want it." "Then what do you want?" Theon demanded, and for the first time she heard frustration in his voice. "To hide forever? To let your father's murderers win? To spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, waiting for the knife in the dark?" "I want to be safe!" Belle shouted, and the words echoed in the small room, raw and desperate. "I want to wake up without being afraid. I want to exist without wondering if today's the day they find me. I want—" She broke off, tears streaming down her face. Theon closed the distance between them in 2 strides. He didn't touch her, but his presence was solid, grounding. "You'll never be safe," he said quietly. "Not while Dominic believes he has a claim. Not while Marguerite holds power. The only way forward is through, Belle. And I know you're strong enough. I've seen it." Belle looked up at him through blurred vision. "You don't know me." "I know you ran," Theon said. "When your world fell apart, when everyone you trusted turned against you, you didn't break. You survived. You adapted. You endured." His voice dropped, barely above a whisper. "That's not weakness, Belle. That's strength. The kind of strength queens are made of." Belle's breath hitched, and then from somewhere below came the sound of shattering glass. Theon's entire body went rigid. In one fluid motion, he crossed to the window and looked down. "What is it?" Belle whispered. Theon's expression turned to stone. "They're here." "Who's—" "Dominic's hunters." Theon turned, his hand already on the hilt of a blade Belle hadn't noticed before. "They must have followed me. Or someone in town talked." His eyes met hers, sharp and urgent. "We need to leave, now." But before Belle could move, the door burst open. 3 men filled the doorway, swords drawn, faces hidden beneath dark hoods. The lead hunter stepped forward, his blade pointed directly at Belle. "Belle Ashcroft," he said, his voice cold. "By order of Regent Dominic, you are under arrest for treason and conspiracy against the crown. Surrender, and your death will be quick." Belle's legs gave out. She would have fallen if Theon hadn't caught her, pulling her behind him in one smooth motion. "She's under my protection," Theon said, his voice lethal. "And if you want her, you'll have to go through me." The hunter laughed, a harsh grating sound. "You think we don't know who you are, Southern King. You have no authority here. Stand aside, or we'll cut you down with her." Theon smiled. It was the most terrifying thing Belle had ever seen. "Try." The world exploded into violence. The first hunter lunged before Belle could even scream. Theon moved like water, smooth, inevitable, deadly. His blade sang free of its sheath and met the hunter's sword in a shower of sparks. The clash rang through the small room, so loud Belle's ears rang. She stumbled backward, her spine hitting the wall, her breath coming in sharp gasps. The second hunter circled left, trying to flank Theon. The third moved right, boxing him in. "Get behind the bed," Theon snapped, not taking his eyes off his opponents. Belle's legs wouldn't move. She was frozen, watching as 3 armed killers closed in on the man who'd promised to protect her. The man she'd met barely 2 days ago. The man she still wasn't sure she could trust. The lead hunter feinted high. Theon blocked, twisted, and drove his elbow into the man's throat. The hunter staggered back, choking, and Theon used the momentum to spin and parry the second hunter's strike. Metal screamed against metal. "Belle, move!" Theon roared. The command broke through her paralysis. Belle dove behind the bed just as the third hunter's blade whistled through the space where her head had been. The sword bit into the wooden bedpost with a sickening thunk. "Damn it!" the hunter snarled, yanking his weapon free. Theon pressed his advantage. He moved with brutal efficiency, each strike calculated, each block precise. But 3 against 1 were impossible odds, even for a king. Blood bloomed on his shoulder where one blade had slipped past his guard. He didn't slow. Belle's hands scrabbled across the floor, searching for anything, a weapon, a tool, something to help. Her fingers closed around a heavy candlestick. The lead hunter recovered, spitting blood, and raised his sword for a killing blow aimed at Theon's exposed back. Belle surged to her feet and swung the candlestick with everything she had. The impact jarred her arms to the shoulders. The hunter's head snapped sideways, and he crumpled, his sword clattering to the floor. Theon didn't pause. He drove his blade through the second hunter's defenses and into the man's chest. The hunter's eyes went wide, shocked, before he collapsed. The third hunter took one look at his fallen comrades and bolted. Theon started after him, but Belle's voice stopped him cold. "Let him go!" Theon whirled, his expression fierce. "He'll bring reinforcements. I know!" Belle's hands were shaking so badly the candlestick slipped from her grip and thudded to the floor. "But if you chase him, I'm alone, and I—" Her voice cracked. "I can't be alone right now." For a heartbeat, Theon hesitated. Then he crossed the room in 3 strides and gripped her shoulders, his gray eyes searching her face. "Are you hurt?" Belle shook her head. She wasn't hurt, not physically, but something inside her chest felt cracked open, raw and bleeding. "I killed him," she whispered, staring at the fallen hunter. "I hit him, and he—" "You saved my life," Theon interrupted firmly. "And if you hadn't, we'd both be dead." Belle's stomach lurched. She turned away and retched, but nothing came up except bile and terror. Theon's hand was warm on her back. "Breathe, just breathe." "I can't. They're going to kill me. They're really going to—" "Belle." Theon turned her to face him, his grip gentle but unyielding. "Listen to me. We're leaving. Right now, before more of them come." "Where?" Belle's vision swam. "Where can we possibly go that they won't find us?" Theon's jaw tightened. "South. To my kingdom. Where I have armies and fortresses and enough power to keep you safe while we figure out how to take back what's yours." Belle wanted to laugh, or scream, or collapse. Instead, she nodded numbly. "Good." Theon released her and moved swiftly around the room, gathering weapons, maps, supplies. He paused at the fallen hunters, checking them quickly, then pulled a signet ring from the lead hunter's finger. His expression darkened. "What is it?" Belle asked. "This." Theon held up the ring. It bore the same raven and crown crest she'd seen on Dominic's letter. "Official hunters, not mercenaries. Dominic sent his own men. He knows I'm alive." The realization settled over Belle like ice water. He knows, and he's not taking chances. "No." Theon pocketed the ring. "Which means we're out of time." They left through the window. Theon went first, dropping to the alley below with practiced ease, then caught Belle as she jumped. Her landing was clumsy, her ankle twisting, but Theon steadied her before she could fall. "Can you run?" he asked. Belle tested her weight. Pain lanced up her leg, but it held. "Yes." "Then run." They fled into the maze of back streets and narrow alleys that threaded through the town's east side. Belle knew these paths. She'd walked them 100 times, always taking the long way, always avoiding the main roads. Now that paranoia saved her life. Behind them, shouts erupted from the inn. Torches flared to life. The alarm spread like wildfire. "There, in the alley! Stop them!" Theon grabbed Belle's hand and pulled her down a side passage so narrow they had to turn sideways. Her injured ankle screamed in protest, but she bit down on her lip and kept moving. They emerged onto Copper Street. Belle's room was 3 buildings down. She could see the chandler's shop, the familiar door, the window where she'd spent so many nights staring at the stars and pretending she was safe. "We can't stop," Theon said, reading her thoughts. "I have things, clothes, money. No time." He tugged her forward. "They'll search every building. If we go back, we're trapped." Belle's heart clenched. 3 years of her life contained in that tiny room. The few possessions she'd managed to keep. Her mother's locket, her father's letter. Gone. All of it. Gone. But she was alive. For now. They ran. The town's edge came into view, the place where cobblestones gave way to dirt, where the river bent south and the forest began. Theon led her toward a small stable tucked behind a blacksmith's forge. "You have horses?" Belle gasped. "I'm a king, Belle. Of course I have horses." 2 magnificent beasts waited inside, already saddled. A young, stable hand stood nervously near the door, wringing his cap in his hands. "Your Majesty," the boy stammered. "I heard shouting." "We're leaving." Theon pressed a heavy purse into the boy's hands. "You never saw us. Understood?" The boy's eyes went wide at the weight of the coin. "Yes, sir. I mean, Your Majesty. I mean—" "Good lad." Theon swung onto his horse, then reached down for Belle. She'd ridden before as a child, but that felt like another lifetime. She gripped Theon's hand and let him pull her up behind him. The horse shifted under their combined weight, and Belle wrapped her arms around Theon's waist to keep from sliding off. "Hold tight," he warned. Then they were moving, the horse's hooves thundering against the packed earth, the wind whipping Belle's hair from its kerchief. The town blurred past. Familiar streets, familiar faces now lit by torchlight and confusion, familiar routines shattered beyond repair. Belle buried her face against Theon's back and held on. They rode hard for an hour before Theon finally slowed. The forest had swallowed them whole, the trees so thick that moonlight barely penetrated the canopy. The only sounds were the horse's labored breathing and the distant hoot of an owl. "We'll rest here," Theon said quietly, dismounting. "Just for a moment." Belle slid off the horse less gracefully, her legs nearly buckling. Every muscle ached, her ankle throbbed, and the adrenaline that had carried her this far was rapidly draining away, leaving nothing but bone-deep exhaustion. She sank onto a fallen log and dropped her head into her hands. Theon moved through the darkness with quiet efficiency, checking the horses, scanning the forest, always alert, always ready. "You should eat something," he said, offering her a strip of dried meat from his pack. Belle shook her head. "I can't. You need to keep your strength up." "I said I can't." The words came out sharper than she intended. Belle looked up, meeting Theon's gaze. "I just killed a man. I watched you kill another, and now we're running for our lives through a forest in the middle of the night because my stepbrother wants me dead. Forgive me if I'm not hungry." Theon studied her for a long moment. Then he sat down beside her, close but not touching. "Your first kill is always the hardest," he said quietly. Belle's laugh was bitter. "Is that supposed to comfort me?" "No. It's supposed to prepare you." Theon's voice was steady, matter-of-fact. "Because if we survive this, if we make it to my kingdom and rally support and march on the capital, there will be more. More fighting, more blood. And you need to decide right now if you can live with that." Belle's hands clenched into fists. "What if I can't? Then we find you somewhere safe to hide, and I go to war alone." "You'd do that?" Belle turned to stare at him. "You'd fight my battle for me?" "I made a promise to your father," Theon said simply. "I intend to keep it." Something twisted in Belle's chest. Gratitude and resentment tangled together so tightly she couldn't separate them. "I don't want you to fight for me," she said. "I don't want anyone else to die because of me." "Then what do you want?" It was the same question he'd asked before, and Belle still didn't have an answer. "I don't know," she whispered. "I just know I'm tired of running, tired of being afraid, tired of—" Her voice broke. "I'm so tired, Theon." For the first time since she'd met him, Theon's expression softened into something almost gentle. "I know," he said, "but you're not alone anymore, and I won't let them take you." Belle wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that this stranger, this king, could keep her safe when her own family had failed her. But trust was a luxury she'd learned to live without. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked. "The truth. Not because of some promise to my father, not because of politics or alliances. Why?" Theon was quiet for so long Belle thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Because 3 years ago I received a letter from a dying man begging me to protect his daughter, and I was too late. I failed him." His jaw tightened. "I won't fail you." The raw honesty in his voice stripped away Belle's defenses. She saw, for just a moment, past the king and the warrior to the man beneath, the one who carried his own ghosts, his own regrets. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Don't be." Theon stood, offering her his hand. "We need to keep moving. The forest will cover us for now, but Dominic's hunters know this region. We need to reach the southern border before dawn." Belle took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. "How far?" 10 miles, maybe 12. Theon's eyes met hers. "Can you make it?" Belle's ankle screamed in protest. Her body begged for rest, but she nodded. "I can make it." They rode through the night, the forest shifting around them like a living thing. Twice, they heard the distant baying of hounds, and Theon veered off the path, leading them through streams to break the scent trail. Belle clung to him, half asleep in the saddle, her exhaustion so complete that even fear couldn't keep her awake. When she jolted alert again, the forest had thinned. Ahead, a river glittered in the pre-dawn light, wider and faster than the one near the café, its waters dark and churning. "The Silver Run," Theon said. "The border between the northern and southern realms." Belle stared at the water. "That's it? Just a river?" "Just a river," Theon agreed. "But cross it, and you're under my protection. My law. Dominic has no authority on the southern side." Belle's heart leaped. "Then we're safe?" "For now." Theon's tone was cautious. "But Dominic won't stop. He'll send diplomats, make demands, threaten war if I don't hand you over." "And will you?" Theon looked at her, and there was something fierce and unyielding in his gaze. "Never." The words settled over Belle like armor. They urged the horses forward into the shallows. The water was shockingly cold, soaking through Belle's skirt, making her gasp. The horse beneath them struggled against the current, but Theon guided it with steady hands, murmuring encouragement. Halfway across, Belle heard the shout. "There, on the river!" She twisted in the saddle. Behind them, on the northern bank, a dozen riders had emerged from the forest. At their head was a figure in dark armor, his face hidden behind a helm, but Belle recognized the crest on his chest, the raven and crown. Dominic's personal guard. "Go," Belle urged. "Faster!" "Hold on," Theon growled and kicked the horse into a gallop. Water sprayed up around them. The horse's hooves slipped on the rocky riverbed, and for one terrible moment Belle thought they'd go under. But Theon hauled on the reins, keeping them upright, driving them forward. An arrow hissed past Belle's ear and splashed into the water. "They're shooting!" she cried. "I noticed," Theon said through gritted teeth. More arrows followed, a deadly rain that churned the water around them. One struck the horse's flank, and the beast screamed but didn't slow. Blood streamed from the wound, mixing with the river water. "Almost there," Theon said. "Just a little farther." The southern bank loomed ahead, solid ground, safety. They lunged out of the water, the horse's hooves finding purchase on the muddy slope, and then they were across. Belle's breath came in ragged sobs. "We made it. Belle, get down!" Theon shoved her off the horse just as another volley of arrows sliced through the air. She hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind from her lungs. Above her, Theon wheeled the horse around, drawing his sword. On the northern bank, the armored figure raised his hand. The archers lowered their bows. Slowly, the figure removed his helmet. Belle's blood turned to ice. It was Dominic. Her stepbrother looked older than she remembered, harder, colder, with her father's dark hair but none of his warmth. His eyes, pale and calculating, locked onto Belle with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "Hello, sister," Dominic called across the water. His voice was smooth, almost pleasant. "It's been a long time." Belle couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Theon stepped in front of her, his sword still raised. "She's under my protection now, Ashcroft. Turn back." Dominic's smile was thin and cruel. "Protection? Is that what you call kidnapping the rightful heir of the Northern Realm?" "Rightful heir?" Theon's laugh was harsh. "You're a pretender wearing a dead man's crown, and we both know it." Dominic's smile didn't waver. "Careful, Southern King. Those are dangerous accusations." "Then prove me wrong." Theon gestured at Belle. "Let her speak. Let her tell everyone assembled here what happened the night Lord Cassian died." Belle found her voice. It came out hoarse, shaking, but it came. "You killed him," she said. "You and your mother. You poisoned my father and stole his throne." Dominic's expression flickered, just for a moment before smoothing back into pleasant neutrality. "Grief does strange things to the mind, Belle. I understand you're confused, frightened. But this man," he pointed at Theon, "is filling your head with lies. Come home. Let us care for you. Let us help you heal." "Liar!" Belle's voice cracked. "You tried to kill me that night, too. I heard you in the hallway. I heard you tell your men to search every room, to leave no witnesses." "You heard nothing," Dominic snapped, and for the first time his mask slipped. Anger flashed in his eyes, cold and deadly. "Because you're a frightened girl who ran away and hid like a coward while I held the realm together. The lords chose me, Belle, not you, because they know what you are. Weak, worthless, unfit to rule." The words hit like physical blows. Belle flinched, and Dominic's smile returned. But I'm willing to be merciful, he continued, his tone softening to something almost kind. Come back with me now, publicly renounce any claim to the Ashcroft name, and I'll let you live. You can retire to a quiet life somewhere far from court. No one needs to know you ever returned. Belle's hands clenched into fists. Every instinct screamed at her to accept, to take the escape he offered, to run and hide and disappear again. But then she thought of her father, of the book Theon had shown her, of the throne that was hers by blood and right. And she thought of the café, the years spent invisible, voiceless, too afraid to even exist. No, she said. Dominic's smile vanished. What? I said no. Belle stepped out from behind Theon, her legs shaking but her voice growing stronger. I'm not going back. I'm not renouncing anything, and I'm not afraid of you anymore. It was a lie. She was terrified. But she said it anyway. Dominic's face darkened. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was running, Belle shot back. But I'm done running now. For a long moment, silence stretched across the river. The two groups faced each other, north and south, hunter and hunted, pretender and heir. Then Dominic laughed. It was a cold, terrible sound. So be it, he said. You've chosen your side, Belle. And when I marched south to drag you back in chains, remember, you forced my hand. He turned his horse and rode back into the forest, his guards following. Within moments, they'd vanished into the trees. Belle's legs gave out. She sank to the ground, trembling so hard her teeth chattered. Theon sheathed his sword and knelt beside her. You did well. I declared war on my own stepbrother, Belle whispered. No. Theon's hand was warm on her shoulder. He declared war on you the moment he killed your father. You just stopped pretending otherwise. Belle looked up at him, at this king who'd upended her life and dragged her into a nightmare she'd spent 3 years fleeing. What do we do now? She asked. Theon's smile was grim. Now. We prepare. Because Dominic won't wait long, and when he comes... His eyes met hers, steady and unyielding. We'll be ready. Belle nodded slowly. She didn't feel ready. She felt broken and terrified and completely out of her depth. But she was done running, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The southern fortress of Thornhaven rose from the cliffs like a sentinel, carved from stone and defiance. Belle had never seen anything like it. Walls 40 feet high, towers that scraped the sky, iron gates thick enough to withstand a battering ram. This wasn't just a stronghold. It was a declaration of power. And it terrified her. Home, Theon said quietly as they approached. The word carried weight, history, belonging, things Belle hadn't felt in 3 years. The gates opened before they reached them, guards in crimson and gold snapping to attention. Their eyes tracked Belle with undisguised curiosity, but no one spoke. No one questioned. If their king arrived with a mud-stained, exhausted stranger clinging to his back, that was his business. Inside, the fortress was a maze of corridors and courtyards. Servants appeared from nowhere, whisking away the injured horse, offering water and food. Belle stumbled through it all in a daze, her mind still stuck on that riverbank, on Dominic's cold smile, on the moment she'd chosen war over peace. This way. Theon guided her up a spiral staircase, his hand steady on her elbow when she swayed. You need rest. I need answers, Belle countered, though her voice lacked conviction. Her body was screaming for sleep, but her mind refused to quiet. Theon pushed open a heavy wooden door. Beyond it lay a chamber that made Belle's tiny room above the chandler's shop look like a closet. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, draped in deep blue silk. Windows overlooked the forest they'd fled through, now bathed in morning light. A fire crackled in the hearth. Answers can wait until you're not dead on your feet, Theon said. Sleep, eat, recover. Then we'll talk strategy. Strategy, Belle repeated numbly. The word felt foreign, like something from a language she'd forgotten. I don't know the first thing about strategy. No. Theon's gaze was steady. But I do. And you're going to learn. He left before she could protest, closing the door with a soft click. Belle stood alone in the opulent chamber, feeling like an imposter. The waitress playing at queen, the coward pretending at courage. She crossed to the window and stared out at the endless forest, wondering how many of Dominic's hunters were already moving through those trees, hunting her. She didn't remember lying down, but when she woke, the sun had shifted to late afternoon and someone had left a tray of food on the bedside table. Belle's stomach growled, and she realized she hadn't eaten in over a day. She devoured bread and cheese and cold chicken, barely tasting it, then found a wash basin and scrubbed 3 years of hiding from her skin. When she looked in the mirror, a stranger stared back, bruised, hollow-eyed, afraid, but alive. A knock interrupted her reflection. A young woman entered, arms laden with fabric. "His Majesty thought you might need proper clothing," the woman said, her accent thick with the rolling vowels of the southern dialect. "I'm Alara. I'll be your attendant while you're here." "I don't need an attendant," Belle protested. Alara's smile was kind but firm. "Everyone in the king's household has an attendant. And begging your pardon, my lady, but you're going to need help navigating court politics if you're planning to take on the Northern Realm." Belle wanted to argue, but Alara was already laying out dresses, deep greens and rich browns, nothing like the pale, forgettable grays Belle had worn for years. "I'm not a lady," Belle said quietly. "I'm just—" "Belle Ashcroft, last heir of the Northern Royal Line," Alara interrupted, meeting her eyes. "Word travels fast in a fortress, my lady. Everyone knows who you are and what you're up against." The weight of that knowledge pressed down on Belle's shoulders. "What do they think, the people here, about me?" Alara hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "They think you're brave. Or foolish. Maybe both." Dominic Ashcroft has the backing of the Northern Lords, a trained army, and 3 years of established rule. You have— She paused. "Well, you have the king. Is that enough? I suppose we'll find out." 3 hours later, Belle stood in Theon's war room wearing a dress of forest green that fit like it had been made for her. Her hair, clean and brushed for the first time in days, hung loose down her back. She looked almost regal. She felt like a child playing dress-up. The war room was dominated by a massive table covered in maps. A dozen people stood around it, generals, advisors, people whose titles Belle didn't know and whose names blurred together. They'd all turned when she entered, their expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism to outright hostility. Theon stood at the head of the table. He'd changed too, trading his travel-stained clothes for the formal attire of his office, black and crimson, with the wolf and crown crest of the southern reaches embroidered on his chest. He looked every inch the king. "Belle," he said, his tone formal, "join us." She crossed to the table on unsteady legs. The map showed both realms, north and south, divided by the Silver Run River. Little wooden pieces were scattered across it. Soldiers, she realized, armies. "Gentlemen, Lady Ashcroft," Theon announced. "We have a problem. Dominic has mobilized his forces. Our scouts report 3 battalions moving south. They'll reach the border within the week." A grizzled general with a scar bisecting his face grunted. "Let them come. We'll cut them down at the river." "And start a war that will cost thousands of lives," another advisor countered. "Your Majesty, perhaps negotiation—" "There's nothing to negotiate," Belle heard herself say. Every head swiveled toward her. "Dominic won't stop. He can't. If I'm alive, I'm a threat to his claim. The only way he stays on that throne is if I'm dead." Silence. Then the scarred general barked a laugh. "Girl's got steel, I'll give her that." "Lady Ashcroft is right," Theon said. "Dominic sees this as existential, which means we need to be smarter, faster, and more strategic than he is." He placed a wooden piece on the map, a single figure, isolated near the northern capital. "The Northern Lords don't all support Dominic. Some are loyal to the old bloodline. They'd back Belle's claim if they believed she could win." "And how do we convince them of that?" an advisor asked skeptically. "She's been in hiding for 3 years. She has no army, no resources, no—" "She has me," Theon said quietly. The room went still. "And anyone who wants to challenge her claim will have to go through the full might of the southern reaches." Belle's breath caught. He was offering her more than protection. He was offering her legitimacy, but the scarred general shook his head. "With respect, Your Majesty, the Southern Lords won't support a northern war, not without cause. They'll see it as conquest, not justice." "Then we give them cause," Theon said. Belle, tell them what happened the night your father died. All eyes turned to her. Belle's throat went dry. She'd spent 3 years not talking about that night, burying it so deep she could almost pretend it hadn't happened. I can't. You can, Theon said firmly. And you will. Because these men need to understand what they're fighting for. Belle's hands clenched into fists. She stared at the map, at the wooden pieces, at anything except the faces watching her. My father died on his 53rd birthday, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. There was a feast. Everyone was there. The Northern Lords, their families, Marguerite and Dominic. Father seemed happy, healthy. He gave a speech about legacy and honor and... Her voice cracked. And then he collapsed. She forced herself to continue. They said it was his heart, natural causes, but I saw Marguerite's face when it happened. She wasn't surprised. She was satisfied. And that night after they'd taken his body away, I heard her and Dominic talking in the hallway outside my room. Belle's fingernails dug into her palms. She's the only one who knows, Dominic said. The only one who might question. And Marguerite said, the words stuck in her throat like shards of glass. She said, then deal with her, tonight. Make it look like grief. No one will question a daughter who couldn't live without her father. Someone swore softly. I ran, Belle whispered. I climbed out my window and ran, and I didn't stop until I reached the river town. I thought if I disappeared, if I became nobody, they'd forget about me. But they didn't. They won't. The room was utterly silent. Then the scarred general spoke. That's not just succession politics, that's murder, regicide. Yes, Theon said, which is why this isn't conquest. It's justice. Justice, another advisor repeated slowly. But can we prove it? Without proof, it's just the word of a frightened girl against the regents. Belle flinched at frightened girl, but before she could respond, Theon pulled a sealed letter from his coat. I have proof, he said quietly. A letter from Lord Cassian Ashcroft, written 2 weeks before his death. He sent it to me with instructions to open it only if he died under suspicious circumstances. Theon broke the seal and unfolded the parchment. He names Marguerite. He details her attempts to poison him slowly, to make his death seem natural, and he names me as guardian of his daughter, should anything happen to him. The generals and advisors leaned in, reading over Theon's shoulder. Belle's vision blurred. Her father had known. He'd known. And he'd tried to protect her, and it hadn't been enough. This changes everything, the scarred general said. With this letter, we're not invading. We're honoring a dead lord's final wishes. Exactly, Theon said, which is why I'm calling a council. Every southern lord, every northern lord still loyal to the old bloodline, will present the evidence, make the case, and let them decide. And if they decide against Belle? An advisor asked. Theon's expression hardened. Then we go to war anyway, but at least we'll have tried diplomacy first. The meeting continued for another hour, strategies debated, plans refined. Belle stood silent through most of it, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of what Theon was proposing. Armies, councils, war, all because she'd refused to die quietly. When the room finally emptied, only she and Theon remained. Belle stared at the map, at the wooden pieces representing thousands of lives that might be lost. I can't do this, she whispered. Yes, you can. I'm nobody, Theon. A waitress, a coward who ran and hid. These people, she gestured at the empty room. They want a leader, a queen, someone strong and brave and... Human? Theon interrupted. He crossed to her, his gray eyes intense. Belle, you survived 3 years alone with killers hunting you. You crossed a river under arrow fire. You stood on that bank and told Dominic to his face that you weren't afraid. That's not cowardice, that's courage. I was afraid, Belle said desperately. I'm still afraid. Good. Theon's hand was warm on her shoulder. Fear keeps you alive. But it's what you do despite the fear that defines you, and you... His voice softened. You're stronger than you know. Belle wanted to believe him. But doubt was a poison she'd been drinking for 3 years, and it didn't wash away easily. What if I fail? She whispered. Then we fail together, Theon said simply. But I don't think you will. Before Belle could respond, a guard burst through the door, his face pale. Your Majesty, we have a problem. Theon's expression sharpened. What kind of problem? A rider from the north. He's asking for asylum, says he has information about Dominic's plans. The guard hesitated. And he's asking specifically for Lady Ashcroft. Belle's stomach dropped. Who is he? He says... The guard swallowed hard. He says he's your brother. The world tilted. Belle gripped the edge of the table to keep from falling. That's impossible. I don't have a brother. My father only had me, and Dominic is my stepbrother. Half-brother, the guard corrected. He claims Lord Cassian was his father too, born before you, hidden away. Theon's hand went to his sword. This could be a trap. Or it could be the truth, Belle said, her mind racing. Her father had been married before Marguerite. His first wife had died in childbirth. Or so Belle had always been told. But what if... I need to see him, she said. Belle, if there's even a chance he's telling the truth, I need to know. Belle met Theon's eyes. Please. Theon studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Bring him to the main hall, under heavy guard. The man who entered looked nothing like Belle. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with hair the color of wheat and eyes like storm clouds. But there was something in the set of his jaw, the shape of his nose, that echoed her father's face. Belle's breath caught. Belle. The man's voice was rough, strained. You don't know me, but I've been looking for you for 3 years. Who are you? Belle demanded. My name is Belle Ashcroft. He pulled a chain from beneath his shirt, revealing a signet ring identical to the one Belle's father used to wear. Lord Cassian was my father, and you... His eyes glistened. You're my sister. Belle's legs gave out. Theon caught her, but she barely noticed. How? Why didn't he tell me? Because it was safer if you didn't know, Kael said urgently. Father sent me away when I was 12, after my mother died. He knew Marguerite was dangerous, knew she'd see any male heir as a threat. So he hid me, gave me a new name, a new life. But he wrote to me. Every month for 11 years he wrote. Kael's voice broke, until the letters stopped. He's telling the truth, Theon said quietly. He was holding another letter, this one with Lord Cassian's seal. This was in my archives, a letter requesting I shelter a boy named Kael if anything happened to the Ashcroft line. I never connected it. Why come forward now? Belle interrupted, her mind spinning. If father wanted you hidden. Because Dominic knows about me, Kael said. I don't know how, but he found out. 2 weeks ago, assassins came to my village. I barely escaped. He stepped closer, his expression desperate. Belle, Dominic isn't just trying to kill you. He's trying to erase the entire Ashcroft bloodline. Every heir, every cousin, everyone with even a drop of legitimate claim. He won't stop until we're all dead. The room tilted again. Belle had thought she understood the stakes, her life for Dominic's throne. But this was bigger. This was genocide. How many? She asked hoarsely. How many people is he hunting? At least a dozen that I know of, Kael said. Cousins, distant relatives. He's been systematic, quiet, making it look like accidents, illnesses, anything but murder. But I've been tracking the deaths, following the pattern. And Belle, his hand trembled as he reached for her. We're the last ones left. If we don't stop him now, he wins, Belle finished. He erases us completely and rewrites history. Kael nodded. Theon's expression had gone cold and dangerous. This is beyond succession politics. This is ethnic cleansing. Which means the Northern Lords can't ignore it, Kael said quickly. Most don't know what Dominic's doing. If we can prove it, show them the pattern, they'll turn on him. They have to. And if they don't? Belle asked. Kael met her eyes. Then we fight, together, the way father would have wanted. Belle stared at this stranger who claimed to be her brother, searching for truth in his face. And she found it. In the set of his shoulders, the timbre of his voice, the desperate hope in his eyes. He was real. Her brother was real. What do you need from me? She asked. Kael pulled out a folded map. I've marked every death, every location. If we can get witnesses, survivors, proof that these weren't accidents, we can build a case. But we need to move fast. Dominic's calling a council of his own in 2 weeks. He's going to formally claim the throne and declare you a traitor. Once he does that, any lord who supports Belle will be guilty of treason, Theon finished grimly. He's forcing them to choose. Then we force them first, Belle said. The words came out stronger than she felt, but she held on to them like a lifeline. We call our own council, we present the evidence, and we give the lords a choice: justice or complicity in mass murder. Cale's face broke into a fierce grin. That's my sister. The word, sister, hit Belle like a physical blow. Family. She had family, not just the ghost of her father or the nightmare of Dominic, but someone real, someone who'd survived the same horrors. She wasn't alone anymore. Over the next week, Thornhaven transformed into a war camp. Messengers rode out carrying sealed letters to every northern lord who might still be loyal. Scouts mapped Dominic's troop movements. And Kyle worked tirelessly, documenting every death, every suspicious accident, building an undeniable pattern of murder. Belle threw herself into the work with an intensity that surprised her. She studied maps, memorized names, learned the politics and alliances that governed the realm. Theon was a patient teacher, never condescending, always pushing her to think strategically. You have good instincts, he told her one night as they pored over scout reports. You see patterns others miss. 3 years of watching people taught me to read them, Belle said. When you're invisible, you notice things. Theon's expression softened. You're not invisible anymore. No, she wasn't, and that terrified her almost as much as it exhilarated her. But not everyone at Thornhaven welcomed her presence. The southern lords who arrived for Theon's council made their skepticism clear. Belle was an outsider, a northerner, a girl who'd spent 3 years serving coffee instead of learning statecraft. Why should they risk their soldiers, their resources, their lives for her claim? She's not one of us, Lord Garrett said bluntly during a private meeting. And frankly, Your Majesty, your attachment to her is concerning. This isn't about justice. This is about a northern throne. Why should southern blood be spilled for northern politics? Belle, standing in the corridor outside, heard every word. The criticism stung, but she forced herself to listen. Because today it's northern politics, Theon said coldly. Tomorrow, it's a madman with an army on our border who's proven he'll kill anyone who threatens his power. Do you really think he'll stop at the Silver Run? Silence. Belle Ashcroft isn't just my responsibility, Theon continued. She's the rightful heir to a realm Dominic is destroying from within. Help her take it back and we have a stable ally. Refuse and we have a tyrant neighbor. Choose. The lords chose. Reluctantly, conditionally, but they chose. The northern lords were harder. Only 5 agreed to come, a pitiful number compared to the dozens Dominic commanded. But those 5 represented old families, powerful families, and their presence mattered. On the morning of the council, Belle dressed in a gown of deep midnight blue, her hair braided in the northern style. She looked like royalty. She felt like she was about to be sick. You'll be fine, Kael said, adjusting her collar. Just tell them the truth. And if the truth isn't enough? Then we improvise. Kael's smile was grim. Father always said Ashcrofts were best under pressure. Belle managed a weak laugh. Then Theon appeared in the doorway, resplendent in formal armor, and her laughter died. It's time, he said. The great hall of Thornhaven could hold 300 people. Today it held barely 50, southern lords on one side, northern on the other, with Theon and Belle at the head. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Theon spoke first, laying out the case with clinical precision. Lord Cassian's letter, the pattern of deaths Kael had documented, witness testimony from survivors. The evidence mounted, piece by damning piece, until even the skeptics shifted uncomfortably. Then it was Belle's turn. She stood, her hands clenched so tight her nails bit into her palms. Every eye in the room was on her, judging, evaluating, waiting for her to fail. My father was a good man, she began, her voice barely steady. He wasn't perfect, but he was just, and he didn't deserve to die choking on poison while his murderer smiled. She met the eyes of the northern lords, the ones who'd known her father, who'd celebrated at that final feast. You were there, she said. Some of you. You saw him collapse. Did any of you question it? Did any of you think it was strange that a healthy man dropped dead with no warning? Her voice hardened. Or were you too eager to accept Dominic's claim to ask uncomfortable questions? Lord Brennan, one of the Northern Lords, flushed. We had no reason to suspect. My cousin Elric died 3 months after my father, Belle interrupted. Riding accident. My uncle Gerard 6 months later. Fever. My aunt Lissa fell from a tower. My cousin Marcus drowned. 12 deaths in 3 years, my lords. 12 Ashcrofts, all gone, all convenient. She pulled out Kyle map and spread it across the table. Red marks dotted the north like bloodstains. This is genocide, she said flatly, and you stood by and let it happen. The hall erupted. Shouts, denials, accusations flew, but Belle didn't back down. I'm not asking you to like me, she said, raising her voice above the chaos. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to see what's right in front of you. Dominic Ashcroft is a murderer, and if you let him keep that throne, you're complicit. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Then Lord Brennan stood. What would you have us do, girl? March on the capital? We'd be slaughtered. No, Belle said. You'd be fighting for justice, and you wouldn't be alone. She looked at Theon. He stood, his presence commanding. The Southern Reaches stands with Belle Ashcroft, he declared. Any lord who joins her cause will have the full support of my armies, and any who stand against her. His voice went cold. Will answer to me. The threat hung in the air, and slowly, painfully, the Northern Lords began to nod. All except one. Lord Varric, the oldest and most powerful of the Northern Lords present, remained seated. His expression was unreadable. I need proof, he said finally. Not patterns, not testimony, proof. Show me Dominic ordered even one of these deaths, and I'll support your claim. Otherwise, he spread his hands. You're asking me to commit treason based on suspicion. Belle's heart sank. Without Varric, the other Northern Lords would waver. And without them, I have proof, a voice said from the back of the hall. Everyone turned. A figure stepped forward, cloaked and hooded. When she lowered the hood, gasps echoed through the room. It was Marguerite. Belle's stepmother looked older, harder, with lines of bitterness carved deep into her face, but her eyes were sharp, calculating, and terrified. Lady Marguerite, Theon said carefully, this is unexpected. I'm sure it is. Marguerite's voice was cold. But I'm not here for pleasantries. I'm here to end this before it destroys everything. Mother, what are you... Cale started forward, but Marguerite's glare stopped him. You were supposed to stay hidden, she hissed. You and your bleeding heart, just like your father. Belle's mind reeled. You knew about Kyle? Of course I knew. Marguerite's laugh was bitter. Cassian thought he was so clever, hiding his bastard son away. But I've always known, and I let him live because he was no threat, unlike you. She turned to Belle, and the hatred in her eyes was palpable. You should have died that night, Marguerite said flatly. It would have been cleaner, kinder. But you ran, and Dominic... Her voice cracked. My son is many things, but he's not a monster. He never wanted this. I did. The hall went deathly silent. You're confessing? Lord Varric asked slowly. I'm stating facts, Marguerite said. I poisoned Cassian. I ordered the deaths of every Ashcroft heir who might challenge Dominic's claim. And I'd do it again, because my son deserves that throne more than any of you weak, spineless... Mother, stop! The shout came from the doorway. Dominic stood there, flanked by guards, but his face was ashen, horrified. You told me they were accidents, he said hoarsely. You told me Belle ran away. You told me... I told you what you needed to hear, Marguerite snapped. You're too soft, Dominic, just like your father was. If I'd left it to you, Belle would still be serving coffee, and we'd have nothing. Dominic staggered like he'd been struck. You murdered them, all of them, and you let me think... I saved you, Marguerite said fiercely. I gave you a kingdom, and this is how you repay me? By bringing guards to arrest me? The guards shifted uncomfortably, looking between Dominic and Marguerite. I didn't come to arrest you, Dominic said quietly. I came to stop you, before you destroy us both. He pulled out a letter, the same letter Belle had seen Theon present, and threw it at his mother's feet. "I found this in Father's study," he said, "hidden in a false panel. It names you. It names everything you did." His voice broke. "I didn't want to believe it, but then the scouts told me you were headed here, and I knew." He looked at Belle, and the expression on his face was devastated. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "For all of it. I didn't know. I swear on everything I am, I didn't know." Belle stared at her stepbrother, the man she'd thought was her murderer, the tyrant she'd been preparing to fight, and saw only grief. "But you knew something," she said quietly. "Didn't you? Some part of you suspected." Dominic's shoulders sagged. "Yes, but I was too much of a coward to look too closely, because if I did," he gestured helplessly. "What was I supposed to do, betray my own mother?" "You were supposed to choose justice," Theon said harshly. "I know." Dominic met his eyes. "And I'm choosing it now." He turned to the assembled lords. "Belle Ashcroft is the rightful heir to the Northern throne. I renounce my claim, and I ask," his voice shook, "I ask that she show more mercy than my family showed hers." The hall erupted into chaos, lords shouting, guards drawing weapons, Marguerite screaming denials and curses. But through it all, Belle stood frozen, staring at Dominic. This was the twist she'd never seen coming. Not betrayal, not violence, surrender. And it changed everything. Belle's voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. "Silence." The word wasn't shouted, it wasn't screamed, but something in her tone, some echo of her father's authority, some steel forged in 3 years of survival, made every person in that hall stop and turn. She stood straighter, her chin lifted, and for the first time since entering this fortress, she looked like what she was. An heir. A queen. "Guards," she said quietly, "arrest Lady Marguerite Ashcroft for the murder of Lord Cassian Ashcroft and conspiracy to commit treason against the Northern realm." Marguerite's face twisted with rage. "You have no authority. I have every authority." Belle's eyes were cold. "I am the last legitimate child of Cassian Ashcroft. This is my birthright. And you—" She stepped closer, close enough to see the fear beneath her stepmother's fury. "You are a murderer who thought herself untouchable. But you're not. Not anymore." The guards moved. Marguerite fought, screaming obscenities, but they dragged her toward the doors. As she passed Dominic, she spat at his feet. "Coward," she hissed. "Worthless, weak." "I know," Dominic said quietly, "but I'd rather be weak than become you." The doors slammed shut. Marguerite's screams faded, and Belle turned to face the assembly of lords who would decide her fate. "Lord Varick," she said, "you asked for proof. You have it. Marguerite's confession, my father's letter, the pattern of deaths. What more do you need?" Varick stood slowly, his weathered face unreadable. For a long moment, he simply studied her. This girl who'd served coffee 2 weeks ago, who now commanded a hall full of nobles with the ease of someone born to it. "I need to know what kind of queen you'll be," he said finally. "Your father was just but cautious. Marguerite was ambitious, but cruel. Dominic was—" He glanced at the younger man. "Well-meaning but blind. What are you, Belle Ashcroft?" Belle's throat tightened. It was the question she'd been asking herself since Theon had walked into that café. What was she? A waitress, a coward, a survivor. But none of those answers would win her a kingdom. "I'm someone who understands suffering," she said quietly. "I know what it's like to be powerless, to be invisible, to watch the people who should protect you become the ones you have to fear." She met Varick's eyes. "I won't be a perfect queen, Lord Varick. I don't have the training or the experience, but I will never forget what it feels like to be at the mercy of someone else's cruelty, and I will spend every day of my reign making sure no one in this realm has to feel that way again." Varick's expression softened, just a fraction. "Pretty words, but can you back them with action?" "Ask me in a year," Belle said. "If I fail, remove me. If I succeed—" She straightened her shoulders. "Then perhaps you'll remember that queens aren't born. They're forged." A slow smile spread across Varick's face. "Your father would be proud." He dropped to one knee. The gesture rippled through the hall like a stone in water. One by one, the northern lords knelt. Then the southern lords followed, their skepticism giving way to something Belle hadn't dared hope for. Acceptance. Theon was the last to kneel. When their eyes met, his gaze held something that made Belle's breath catch. Not just respect, not just duty, something deeper. "My queen," he said softly. The words settled over Belle like a crown she wasn't ready to wear. But she held herself steady, nodded once, and let the moment sear itself into her memory. This was the beginning. Not of peace, not of safety, but of power. The council dissolved into logistics. Lords pledging troops, strategists mapping routes, messengers dispatched to spread word of Marguerite's arrest and Dominic's renunciation. Belle watched it all with a strange sense of detachment, as if she were observing someone else's life. "You did well," Kyle said, appearing at her elbow. "Father would have been impressed." "Father would have known what to do next," Belle countered. "I'm making this up as I go." "So did he." Kyle's smile was sad. "He told me once that leadership is just controlled improvisation. You figure out the next step, then the next, and hope you don't fall off the cliff before you reach solid ground." "Comforting," Belle muttered. But Kyle's words stayed with her through the long afternoon of negotiations. One step at a time. She could manage that. By evening, the plan had taken shape. Belle would travel to the northern capital with an escort of southern and northern forces, enough to ensure her safety, but not so many as to look like an invasion. Dominic would accompany her, publicly supporting her claim, and Marguerite would stand trial before the assembled lords of both realms. It was bold, it was risky, and it depended entirely on the northern people accepting Belle as their rightful queen. "What if they don't?" Belle asked Theon later when they were finally alone in the war room. "What if they see me as an outsider propped up by a southern king?" "Then we adjust," Theon said calmly. He was marking troop positions on the map, his movements precise. "But I don't think they will. People aren't stupid, Belle. They know Marguerite's rule was built on lies. They know Dominic was a puppet. You represent something new, something honest, something terrifying," Belle corrected. Theon looked up, his gray eyes sharp. "Are you afraid?" "Yes." "Good. Fear will keep you sharp." He set down the marker and crossed to her. "But don't let it paralyze you. You've come too far for that." Belle wanted to believe him, but doubt was a familiar weight, and she'd carried it so long she wasn't sure how to set it down. "What if I'm not enough?" The question came out small, vulnerable. "What if I reclaim the throne and prove everyone right? That I'm just a frightened girl playing at power?" Theon's hand cupped her cheek, gentle but firm. "Then you'll learn. You'll grow. You'll become the queen you need to be." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "But Belle, you're already more than you think you are. I've seen warriors crumble under less pressure. You're still standing." The touch sent warmth through Belle's chest, melting some of the ice she'd wrapped around her heart. For 3 years, she'd been alone, untouched, isolated. Now Theon stood so close she could feel his breath, and every instinct screamed at her to close the distance. But before she could move, a knock shattered the moment. "Your Majesty." A guard stood in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. "Lord Dominic requests an audience with Lady Ashcroft, in private." Theon's jaw tightened, but he stepped back. "I'll be right outside." "You don't have to." "Yes," Theon said quietly. "I do." He left, and moments later Dominic entered. Belle's stepbrother looked haggard, as if he'd aged a decade in the past few hours. His eyes were red-rimmed, his shoulders slumped. He stopped just inside the doorway, keeping distance between them. "I won't ask for forgiveness," he said without preamble. "I don't deserve it. But I need you to understand, I didn't know. About the murders, the poison, any of it. My mother told me you'd run away after Father's death. That grief had broken you. I believed her because..." His voice cracked. "Because believing her was easier than facing what she'd done." Belle studied him. The man who'd sent hunters after her. The man who'd ruled in her father's name while their family was systematically slaughtered. The man who'd just surrendered a kingdom to make it right. "Why now?" she asked. "Why confess? Why give up the throne you fought so hard to keep?" "I didn't fight for it," Dominic said bitterly. I just accepted what was handed to me and told myself I deserved it. But finding that letter, reading Father's words, seeing proof of what my mother had done, he met her eyes. I couldn't pretend anymore, and I couldn't let her destroy anyone else. She destroyed you, Belle said quietly. Dominic flinched. Yes, but I let her. I chose ignorance over truth. And people died because of it. He straightened, some of his old pride surfacing. So I'm choosing truth now, even if it costs me everything. Belle wanted to hate him. Part of her still did. But she remembered her father's letters, the ones Theon had shown her, where Cassian had written about Dominic with cautious hope. He's not a bad boy, one letter read. Just lost. If anything happens to me, perhaps you could guide him towards something better. Her father had seen potential in Dominic. Maybe Belle could too. You'll stand trial, she said. For your role in this, even if it was through ignorance, the lords will decide your punishment. Dominic nodded. I expected nothing less. But, Belle paused, choosing her words carefully. If you're sincere about making amends, I'll speak on your behalf. I won't promise mercy, but I'll tell them what you did today, that you chose justice over power. Dominic's eyes glistened. Why? Because my father believed in second chances, Belle said, and because I'm tired of more death. If there's a way forward that doesn't end with your execution, I'd like to find it. For a long moment, Dominic simply stared at her. Then he dropped to one knee, his head bowed. I don't deserve your mercy, he said hoarsely, but I swear on my father's memory, the man who raised me, not the woman who poisoned him. I will spend the rest of my life earning it. Belle's throat tightened. Get up, Dominic. You don't kneel to me. Not yet. Not until this is over and we know what we're building. Dominic rose slowly. He looked lighter somehow, as if confession had lifted a burden he'd carried too long. For what it's worth, he said quietly, you'll be a better ruler than I ever could have been. We'll see, Belle said, but his words settled into her chest, warm and unexpected. After Dominic left, Belle remained in the war room alone. She traced the map with her fingers, the northern capital, the river, the roads that would take her home. Home. She tested the word. For 3 years, home had been a cramped room above a chandler's shop. Before that, it had been her father's estate, full of memories now stained with blood. Could the capital ever feel like home again? Could she walk those halls where Marguerite had plotted murder and Dominic had ruled in ignorance and somehow make it hers? One step at a time, she murmured to the empty room. The journey north began at dawn 3 days later. Belle rode beside Theon at the head of a column of 200 soldiers, an honor guard, not an army, but enough to make a statement. Kyle rode on her other side, his presence a comfort. Dominic rode farther back, flanked by guards, his face set in grim determination. And behind them, in a covered wagon under heavy guard, Marguerite screamed threats that no one acknowledged. The first village they passed through was small, barely more than a crossroads. But word had spread. People lined the road, staring at the procession with wide eyes. Is it true? An old woman called out. Is Lady Belle alive? Before Belle could answer, Theon spoke. Lady Belle Ashcroft, rightful heir to the Northern Realm, rides to reclaim her father's throne. She asks for your loyalty and your faith. The crowd murmured, uncertain, wary. Then a young girl pushed forward, clutching a wilted flower. She held it up to Belle, her eyes huge. My mama said you were dead, the girl whispered. But you're not. Belle's chest tightened. She dismounted, ignoring Theon's protective instinct, and knelt before the child. I'm not dead, she said gently, and I'm going to make sure no one else has to be afraid the way I was. Can I count on you to help me? The girl nodded solemnly and pressed the flower into Belle's hand. It was such a small moment, insignificant in the grand scheme of kingdoms and wars. But as Belle remounted her horse and the crowd began to cheer, quietly at first, then louder, she realized it was these moments that mattered. Not the councils or the strategies or the grand declarations, just a girl with a flower and a queen who knelt to receive it. By the time they reached the second village, the crowds had doubled. By the third, they were cheering her name. Belle Ashcroft, the true queen, justice for Lord Cassian. The swell of support was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. Belle smiled and waved, playing the part, but inside she was trembling. They love you, Kyle said, grinning. Look at them. They love the idea of me, Belle corrected. Someone who isn't Marguerite. Someone who promises change. But what happens when I inevitably disappoint them? Then you apologize and do better, Kael said simply. That's all anyone can do. But the closer they got to the capital, the more Belle's anxiety grew. This was where her father had died, where Marguerite had plotted, where every stone held a memory she'd spent 3 years trying to forget. When the city walls finally came into view, towering in gray against the evening sky, Belle's hands tightened on the reins until her knuckles went white. We can wait until morning, Theon said quietly. Enter with daylight. Make it ceremonial. Belle shook her head. No. If we wait, I'll lose my nerve. We go now. The city gates opened without resistance. The guards stationed there had already heard the news. Marguerite's arrest, Dominic's surrender, Belle's return. They stepped aside, their faces carefully blank. Inside, the streets were packed. Word had spread like wildfire, and it seemed half the city had turned out to see if the rumors were true. Belle Ashcroft, alive, returned. The crowd parted as the procession moved through, silence falling in their wake. Belle kept her head high, her expression calm, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. They reached the palace gates. Beyond them lay the estate where she'd grown up, where her father had ruled, where her childhood had ended in poison and blood. Belle, Theon's voice was soft. You don't have to do this alone. She looked at him. This king who'd risked war for her, who'd taught her strategy and strength, who'd never once treated her like the scared waitress she'd been. I know, she said, but I need to enter first, alone. If the lords inside see me walk in flanked by southern guards, it looks like conquest. But if I walk in alone, it looks like a queen coming home, Kael finished. Belle nodded. She dismounted, her legs unsteady, and approached the palace doors. They were massive, carved oak, reinforced with iron, and she remembered being small enough that she'd needed 2 hands to push them open. Now she pressed her palm against the wood and shoved. The doors swung inward. Inside, the great hall was full. Northern lords who'd stayed loyal to Marguerite's regime stood clustered in groups, their expressions ranging from shock to fury to fear. At the far end, on the dais where her father used to sit, the throne sat empty. Belle walked forward. Each step echoed in the cavernous space. Whispers followed her. Is it really her? She looks like Cassian. Marguerite said she was dead. Belle ignored them all. She climbed the dais steps, one at a time, until she stood before the throne. It was smaller than she remembered, less grand, just a chair carved from dark wood, worn smooth by generations of Ashcrofts who'd sat here and tried to rule justly. She turned to face the assembled lords. My name is Belle Ashcroft, she said, her voice carrying through the hall. Daughter of Cassian, last legitimate heir of the Ashcroft bloodline, and I have returned to claim what is mine. Silence. Then a voice rang out from the back. You abandoned us. You fled like a coward and left us to Marguerite's mercy. Belle's jaw tightened. I fled to survive, because the woman you all accepted as regent murdered my father and tried to murder me. I was 15 years old, alone, and hunted. So, yes, I ran, and I survived, which is more than 12 members of my family can say. She gestured, and guards brought forward the documentation Kael had compiled, the deaths, the witnesses, the proof. You want to call me a coward? Belle's voice was hard. Fine. I was. I hid and served coffee and pretended to be no one while my family was slaughtered, but I'm not hiding anymore. And I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm telling you, Marguerite Ashcroft is a murderer. She will stand trial, and if you supported her, if you enabled her, you will answer for it. The hall erupted. Shouts, denials, accusations. But Belle didn't back down. She stood before the throne, not sitting, not yet claiming it, and let the storm rage. Finally, Lord Brennan stepped forward. He was one of the lords who'd come to Thornhaven, who'd heard the evidence. The girl speaks truth, he said loudly. I've seen the proof. Marguerite poisoned Lord Cassian. She ordered the deaths of every Ashcroft who might challenge her son's claim. This isn't politics. This is murder. And any lord who stands with her is complicit. Other northern lords who'd attended the council stepped forward, adding their voices. The tide was turning, but not everyone was convinced. "She brings southern soldiers to our capital," another lord shouted. "She's a puppet of King Theon." "I bring allies," Belle corrected, "because I needed protection from the hunters Marguerite sent after me. But I don't answer to the southern reaches. I answer to the northern realm, to you, to the people my father spent his life serving." She took a breath and made a decision that would either win her a kingdom or lose it forever. "I will prove my loyalty," she said. "Tomorrow, I will stand trial before this assembly. Not Marguerite, me. If any lord has evidence that I'm unfit to rule, that I've betrayed the realm, that I'm anyone's puppet, present it. And if the majority vote against me, I will renounce my claim and name a regent you choose." Gasps rippled through the hall. "Belle, no!" Kyle started forward, but she raised a hand to stop him. "I'm not my stepmother," she said. "I won't take power through fear or murder. If I'm to be queen, it will be because you choose me. Because you believe I can lead, not because I forced you." Theon appeared in the doorway, his expression thunderous. He'd clearly heard her declaration. But Belle met his eyes and shook her head slightly. "Trust me," the look said. For a long moment, Theon didn't move. Then, slowly, he nodded. The assembly dissolved into chaos, lords arguing, debating, already choosing sides. But Belle remained on the dais, steady and calm, until Kyle pulled her aside. "That was either brilliant or insane," he hissed. "Probably both," Belle admitted. "But it's the truth. I can't rule these people if they don't want me. So let's find out if they do." That night, Belle couldn't sleep. She paced her childhood bedroom, the one she'd climbed out of 3 years ago, and watched the moon track across the sky. Tomorrow would decide everything. Tomorrow, the Northern Lords would vote. And if they chose against her, all of this, the flight, the fear, the fighting, would be for nothing. A soft knock made her turn. Theon stood in the doorway, still in his formal armor. "You should be resting," he said. "So should you." He stepped inside and closed the door. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. "That was reckless," Theon said finally, "offering to stand trial, giving them the power to reject you." "I know. You could lose everything." "I know." "Belle?" Theon crossed to her, his hands gripping her shoulders. "Why?" Belle met his eyes. "Because I need to know they choose me, not because they're afraid of Marguerite, or impressed by your army, or following tradition. I need to know that when I sit on that throne, I'm there because they want me to be." Theon's expression softened. "You're nothing like I expected." "Disappointed?" "Amazed." His hand cupped her cheek, the same gentle gesture from the war room, but this time Belle leaned into it. "When your father asked me to protect you, I imagined a spoiled girl who'd need to be dragged into adulthood. But you—" His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "You're brave in ways I never anticipated." Belle's breath caught. "I'm terrified." "I know." Theon's voice was rough. "But you're doing it anyway. That's what bravery is." The space between them evaporated. Belle didn't know who moved first. Maybe both of them, maybe neither. But suddenly Theon's lips were on hers, and the world narrowed to the heat of his mouth, the strength of his arms around her waist, the way her fingers tangled in his hair. It was desperate and tender, and everything Belle hadn't known she needed. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Theon rested his forehead against hers. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said quietly, "you won't face it alone." Belle's hands fisted in his shirt. "Promise?" "I promise." They stood there in the moonlight, holding each other, until exhaustion finally pulled Belle toward sleep. Theon carried her to the bed, pressed a kiss to her forehead, and left without a word. And for the first time in 3 years, Belle slept without nightmares. The trial began at dawn. The great hall was packed. Every lord, every noble, every person of importance in the northern realm. They filled the benches, lined the walls, whispered among themselves. Belle entered alone, wearing a simple gown of deep green, her hair unbound. She looked young, vulnerable, but she walked to the center of the hall with her head high and her shoulders back, and when she spoke, her voice didn't waver. "I am Belle Ashcroft, and I am ready to answer for my life." Lord Varric stood at the head of the assembly, his weathered face grave. In his hands, he held a ceremonial rod, the speaker's staff, which gave him authority to moderate the trial. He struck it once against the floor, and the murmuring ceased. "Belle Ashcroft," he intoned, "you stand before the assembled lords of the Northern Realm to answer charges of abandonment, cowardice, and conspiracy with a foreign power. How do you plead?" Belle's hands were steady at her sides. "I plead truth, Lord Varric, and I ask only that you listen with the same fairness my father would have shown." Varric's expression flickered, approval, perhaps, or memory, before smoothing back to neutrality. "Then let the accusations begin." The first lord to stand was Hadrian, a man Belle vaguely remembered from her childhood. He'd always seemed kind then, bringing her sweets when he visited her father. Now his face was hard with anger. "You fled," he said bluntly. "The night your father died, you abandoned your people. We searched for you, Lady Belle, for months, and you hid like a common criminal while the realm needed leadership." Belle met his eyes. "You're right. I fled, because hours after my father's death I heard Marguerite and Dominic plotting to kill me. I was 15 years old, Lord Hadrian, alone, terrified. What would you have had me do? Walk into their arms and die?" "You could have come to us," Hadrian shot back. "The Northern Lords would have protected you." "Would you?" Belle's voice sharpened. "Marguerite told you I'd run away in grief. She told you I was unstable, broken, unfit to rule, and every single one of you accepted that explanation without question. You didn't search for months, Lord Hadrian. You searched for weeks. Then you gave up and supported Dominic's claim because it was easier." Hadrian's face flushed. "We had no reason to suspect—" "My father had no history of heart disease," Belle interrupted. "He was healthy, active, barely 50 years old, and he dropped dead at his own birthday feast. You had every reason to suspect. You just chose not to look too closely." Murmurs rippled through the hall, uncomfortable, shifting. "That's not fair," another lord protested. "We couldn't have known—" "Couldn't you?" Belle turned to face the assembly. 12 Ashcrofts died in 3 years. 12. At what point does coincidence become conspiracy? At what point did your loyalty to my father require you to ask uncomfortable questions? She pulled out the map Kael had created, holding it up for all to see, the red marks stark against the parchment. "My cousin Elric, dead at 23, riding accident." Her finger traced the first mark. "My aunt Lissa, fell from a tower. My uncle Gerard, fever that killed him in 2 days. My cousin Marcus, he was 9 years old, drowned in a pond he'd swum in his entire life." Belle's voice cracked, but she forced herself to continue. "Did any of you attend those funerals and think it was strange? Did any of you wonder why the Ashcroft line was dying off so conveniently?" Silence. Heavy and damning. "I fled because I was a terrified child," Belle said quietly. "But I stayed hidden because I realized the truth. No one was coming to save me. No one was asking the right questions. And if I returned before I had proof, before I had protection, Marguerite would kill me, and you would all accept whatever lies she told. So, yes, Lord Hadrian, I hid, I survived, and I refuse to apologize for that." Hadrian sank back onto his bench, his face pale. The next accusation came from a younger lord, one Belle didn't recognize. "You bring a southern army to our capital. You align yourself with King Theon. How do we know you're not his puppet? How do we know you won't sell the northern realm to southern interests?" Belle had expected this. "King Theon came to my aid because my father asked him to. Years ago, before his death, my father wrote to Theon and requested protection for me if anything happened to him. Theon honored that request. That's not conspiracy. That's loyalty to a dead man's wishes." "And what has he asked for in return?" the young lord pressed. "What promises have you made to secure his support?" "None." Belle's voice rang clear. "King Theon has asked for nothing except my safety. We have no treaties, no agreements, no secret bargains. He helped me because it was the right thing to do. If that makes me his puppet, then you don't understand either of us." From the doorway, Theon's voice cut through the hall. "May I speak?" Varric hesitated, then nodded. "The king of the southern reaches may address the assembly." Theon strode forward, his presence commanding. He stopped beside Belle, close but not touching, a united front. "I have no designs on the northern realm," he said flatly. My kingdom is prosperous, stable, and sufficient for my needs. I didn't help Belle Ashcroft to gain territory or influence. I helped her because Lord Cassian was my friend, and because watching Marguerite commit genocide while you all looked the other way offended every principle I hold. His gaze swept the assembly, cold and unforgiving. Belle owes me nothing. But you, he pointed at the assembled lords, you owe her everything. Your loyalty, your protection, your willingness to see the truth you've been avoiding for 3 years. She's offering you a chance to make this right. I suggest you take it. He stepped back. The hall erupted in heated whispers. Varric struck the speaker's staff again. Are there further accusations? An older woman stood, Lady Marin, one of the few female nobles in the assembly. A question, not an accusation. Lady Belle, you've been gone for 3 years. You have no experience in governance, no training in statecraft. Why should we trust you to rule when you've spent those years serving coffee instead of preparing for leadership? It wasn't hostile, but it was pointed. Belle nodded slowly. You're right, Lady Marin, I have no formal training, but I've spent 3 years watching people, learning their patterns, their needs, their pain. I know what it's like to be invisible, to have no voice, to depend on the mercy of others. Belle's voice strengthened. Every customer I served had a story. The merchant worried about feeding his family, the widow struggling with her husband's debts. The young mother terrified her children would starve. I listened to them. I saw them. And I learned that leadership isn't about grand proclamations or political maneuvering. It's about seeing the people no one else notices and fighting for them. She met Lady Marin's eyes. Can I negotiate trade agreements? Not yet. Can I navigate the complexities of inter-realm politics? I'll learn. But can I remember what it feels like to be powerless and let that guide every decision I make? Yes. And I think that matters more than any formal training. Lady Marin studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded and sat down. The accusations continued for another hour. Lords questioned her loyalty, her strength, her judgment. And Belle answered each one with the same unflinching honesty that had defined her return. Finally, Varric raised the speaker's staff. Are there any further challenges? Silence. Then we call for testimony in Belle Ashcroft's favor. Who speaks for this woman? Cale stood immediately. I do. Belle is my sister, half-sister, if you want to split hairs, and I've watched her transform from a frightened refugee to the woman standing before you. She's brave, she's honest, and she understands suffering in a way most rulers never will. Father would be proud of her. I know I am. His voice was thick with emotion, and several lords nodded. Dominic stood next. The hall went silent, shocked, tense. I speak for Belle Ashcroft, he said quietly. I have no right to. I wore a crown built on my mother's lies and my own willful ignorance, but Belle showed me mercy when she could have demanded my execution. She offered me a chance to make amends. That's not weakness. That's the kind of strength this realm needs. He looked directly at Belle. You'll be a better ruler than I ever could have been, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving I deserve the second chance you gave me. More nods. More whispers. Then, to Belle's shock, Lord Hadrian stood again. I was wrong to accuse her of cowardice. Lady Belle survived impossible odds and returned to face us despite having every reason to stay hidden. That takes courage. And perhaps, he swallowed hard, perhaps we failed her as much as she thinks we did. I vote in her favor. One by one, lords began to stand, some grudging, some enthusiastic, but standing nonetheless. Lady Moran, Lord Brennan, even the young lord who'd questioned her loyalty. By the time the last lord rose, nearly 3/4 of the assembly was on their feet. Varric surveyed the hall, his expression unreadable. Then he struck the speaker's staff 3 times, the signal for a decision. The assembly has spoken, he declared. By majority vote, Belle Ashcroft is recognized as the rightful heir to the Northern Realm. All charges against her are dismissed. The hall erupted into cheers and applause. Belle's knees nearly buckled, but Theon's hand was suddenly there, steadying her. You did it, he murmured. Belle couldn't speak, couldn't process. She'd prepared for rejection, for exile, for having to fight her way to legitimacy. But they'd chosen her, actually chosen her. Varric raised his hand for silence. However, Recognition as heir is not the same as coronation. There remains the matter of Marguerite Ashcroft's trial and the formal transfer of power. These proceedings will commence tomorrow, but for today, he smiled, the first genuine warmth Belle had seen from him. Welcome home, Lady Belle. The words broke something inside her. Belle felt tears slip down her cheeks, and she didn't bother to wipe them away. Home. After 3 years of running, hiding, surviving, she was home. That night, the palace hosted a feast in Belle's honor. It was smaller than the grand celebrations of her father's time, but the hall was filled with music and laughter, and the smell of roasted meat and fresh bread. Lords who'd questioned her now raised toasts to her health. Servants who remembered her as a child welcomed her back with teary embraces. Belle moved through it in a daze, accepting congratulations, making small talk, playing the role of returning heir. But her mind was already on tomorrow, on Marguerite's trial, on the moment she'd have to face her stepmother and demand justice for her father. "You're not celebrating," Kael observed, appearing with 2 cups of wine. Belle accepted one gratefully. "I'm trying. It just doesn't feel real yet." "Give it time." Kael clinked his cup against hers. "You've spent 3 years bracing for the worst. It'll take a while to accept the good." "Is this good?" Belle asked. "Tomorrow we put Marguerite on trial. We dredge up every horrible thing she did, and then—" She swallowed hard. "Then I have to sentence her. My stepmother. The woman who raised me, however badly." Kael's expression darkened. "She murdered our father. She tried to murder you. She deserves whatever judgment you pass." "I know," Belle whispered, "but that doesn't make it easier." Before Kael could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. Guards were escorting someone through the crowd, a woman in servant's clothes, her face haggard with exhaustion. "I need to speak to Lady Belle," the woman was saying desperately. "Please, I have information about Marguerite." Belle set down her wine and crossed to the woman. "I'm Belle Ashcroft." "What information?" The woman's eyes widened. Up close, Belle recognized her. Clara, who'd worked in the palace kitchens when Belle was a child. "My lady," Clara gasped, dropping into a curtsy. I didn't know if you'd remember me." "I remember." Belle helped her up. "What's wrong?" Claire's hands twisted in her apron. "It's about the night Lord Cassian died. I saw something. Something I was too afraid to speak of before, but now that you're back, now that Marguerite's arrested—" She drew a shaky breath. "I saw her. In the kitchens, just before the feast. She was putting something in the wine decanter, the one meant for your father's table." The hall had gone quiet, everyone straining to hear. "You saw her poison him?" Belle asked carefully. "I didn't know it was poison then," Clara said miserably. I don't know what I thought. Maybe medicine, maybe a tonic. But she saw me watching and her voice dropped to a whisper. She told me if I ever spoke of it, she'd kill my children. I have 3 daughters, my lady. I couldn't—" "It's all right." Belle gripped Clara's hands. "You're safe now. And your testimony, it could change everything." Clara nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I should have spoken sooner. I should have—" "You were protecting your family," Belle said firmly. "I understand that better than anyone. But you're speaking now. That's what matters." She turned to Varric, who'd been watching the exchange. "This changes the trial. With an eyewitness, we can prove murder beyond any doubt," Varric finished grimly. "The assembly will demand blood." Boom, Belle's stomach churned. "What's the penalty for regicide?" "Death?" Varric's voice was flat. "By execution or exile to the frozen wastes, which amounts to the same thing. There's no mercy for killing a sitting lord." Belle nodded slowly. She'd known this was coming, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. Tomorrow, she would have to watch her stepmother die. Belle didn't sleep that night. She paced her room, then the corridors, then found herself in her father's old study. It looked the same. The heavy desk, the shelves of books, the window overlooking the courtyard where she used to play as a child. She sank into her father's chair and let the tears come. Silent, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. For her father. For the childhood ripped away. For the girl she'd been and the woman she'd become. Belle. She looked up. Theon stood in the doorway, his expression soft with concern. "You should be resting," she managed. "So should you." He crossed to her and knelt, taking her hands. "Talk to me." "Tomorrow I sentence Marguerite to death," Belle whispered, "and I don't know if I can do it." "Why not?" "Because I'm not—" She struggled for words. "I'm not cruel, Theon. I don't want revenge. I just want it to stop. The killing, the fear, all of it. But executing her won't stop anything. It'll just be more death." Theon's grip tightened. "It'll be justice. For your father, for the 12 Ashcrofts she murdered, for you. That's not cruelty. That's protecting your people from a threat." "She's not a threat anymore," Belle argued. "She's in chains, powerless. Executing her is just—" She choked on the words. "It's revenge dressed up as justice." "Then don't execute her." Theon's voice was calm. "Exile her. Strip her of title and lands and send her to live out her days in obscurity. You're the queen, Belle. You get to decide what justice looks like." Belle stared at him. "The lords will expect blood." "Well, let them expect it." Theon cupped her face, his touch gentle. "You told them you'd rule differently. Prove it. Show them that mercy can be strength. And if they turn on me for it, then we face that together." Theon's thumb brushed away her tears. "But I don't think they will. You've already shown them courage and honesty. Now show them compassion. Let them see the kind of queen you'll be." Belle leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his certainty. "You have a lot of faith in me." "I do," Theon said simply. "More than you have in yourself." She kissed him then, soft and desperate and grateful. And when they finally broke apart, some of the weight on her chest had lifted. "Stay with me tonight?" she asked quietly. Theon's expression softened. "Always." They didn't make love. They simply held each other, two people who'd been alone for too long finding comfort in shared warmth. And when Belle finally slept, it was dreamless and deep. Marguerite's trial began at noon. The Great Hall was even more packed than the day before, every space filled with nobles, servants, guards, anyone who could claim a reason to witness justice for Lord Cassian. Marguerite was led in wearing chains, her head held high despite her bedraggled appearance. When she saw Belle sitting on the dais, not on the throne yet, but in the seat of judgment, her lip curled. "Playing queen already?" she sneered. "How fitting, you always were good at pretending." Belle didn't rise to the bait. "Marguerite Ashcroft, you stand accused of the murder of Lord Cassian Ashcroft, conspiracy to commit treason, and the systematic execution of 12 members of the Ashcroft bloodline. How do you plead?" "I did what was necessary," Marguerite said coldly. "Cassian was weak. His bloodline was dying. Dominic was the future, and I ensured he had a clear path to power. That's not murder. That's vision." The hall erupted in outrage. Varric had to strike the speaker's staff multiple times to restore order. "You confess, then," Belle said quietly. "I state facts." Marguerite's eyes glittered. "You think you've won, little Belle? You think sitting in judgment of me makes you powerful? You're still the frightened girl who ran away. You're still weak." "Am I?" Belle stood, descending from the dais until she stood face to face with her stepmother. "You spent 3 years hunting me, Marguerite. You sent assassins, hunters, spies, and I survived all of them. You tried to erase the Ashcroft line, but here I stand. You tried to steal my throne, but the lords chose me. So tell me—" Belle's voice was steel. "Who's weak now?" Marguerite's composure cracked. "You're nothing without that southern king protecting you." "Perhaps," Belle allowed, "but I'm here. I'm alive. And you're in chains. That has to count for something." She turned to Varric. "Present the evidence." The next hour was brutal. Clara's testimony about the poisoned wine, Kael's documentation of the murders, witnesses from each death speaking of suspicious circumstances, Dominic's own statement confirming his mother's confession. By the time the evidence concluded, Marguerite's face was ashen. The hall's mood had turned murderous. "The evidence is overwhelming," Varric declared. "Marguerite Ashcroft is guilty of regicide and mass murder. The penalty is death." However, he looked at Belle. "The final sentencing falls to Lady Belle. As the primary victim and rightful heir, what is your judgment? Every eye turned to Belle. She felt the weight of their expectations, the demand for blood, for revenge, for justice delivered in the old, brutal way. But she also heard Theon's voice in her mind. Show them compassion. Let them see the kind of queen you'll be. Marguerite Ashcroft, Belle said slowly, you murdered my father. You destroyed my family. You tried to kill me and erase everything the Ashcroft name stood for. For that, you deserve death. Marguerite's chin lifted defiantly. But, Belle continued, I won't give it to you, because killing you doesn't bring my father back. It doesn't heal the realm. And it doesn't make me the kind of ruler I want to be. She stepped closer to her stepmother. So, here's my sentence. You will be stripped of all titles, lands, and wealth. You will be exiled to the borderlands. Not the frozen wastes where death is certain, but to a place where you can live out your days in obscurity. You will never set foot in the northern realm again. And you will live knowing that everything you fought for, everything you killed for, it all came to nothing. The hall exploded, some shouting approval, others protesting, demanding blood. Varric struck the staff repeatedly. Order! The judgment has been passed. This is mercy? Marguerite spat. This is weakness. This is mercy you don't deserve, Belle interrupted. But I'm giving it anyway, because I refuse to let you make me into someone who kills out of revenge. She turned her back on Marguerite, addressing the hall. This realm has seen enough death. If I'm to rule, it will be with justice tempered by mercy. And if that makes me weak in your eyes, then so be it. For a long moment, silence reigned. Then Lord Brennan stood and began to applaud. Slowly, others joined until the hall thundered with approval. Not everyone was pleased. Some lords looked angry, others disappointed. But the majority had spoken, and Belle had shown them exactly who she was. As guards led Marguerite away, screaming curses and threats, Dominic approached Belle. Thank you, he said quietly. For her, for me, for showing mercy when neither of us earned it. Belle studied him. What will you do now? Whatever you need, Dominic said. I'm still standing trial for my complicity. But if you'll have me, I'd like to help rebuild what my mother destroyed. Belle considered. You'll stand trial. You'll answer for your willful ignorance. But if the Lord show you mercy, and I'll argue they should, then yes, help me rebuild. Help me make this realm into something better. Dominic's eyes glistened. I won't let you down. See that you don't? The coronation took place 3 days later, on the anniversary of her father's death. Belle stood before the assembled realm wearing a gown of midnight blue and silver, her hair woven with the traditional northern braids. The crown, a simple circlet of wrought iron and mountain crystal, rested on a velvet cushion before her. Varric held it aloft, his voice ringing through the hall. Belle Ashcroft, daughter of Cassian, last of the royal bloodline, do you swear to rule justly, to protect the weak, to guide the northern realm with wisdom and honor? Belle's voice was steady. I swear. Do you accept the burden of leadership, the weight of decisions that will shape lives and futures? I accept. Then by the authority vested in me and by the will of the assembled lords, Varric placed the crown on her head. I name you Queen of the Northern Realm. Long may you reign. Long may she reign, the hall echoed. Belle stood, the crown unfamiliar and heavy on her head, and looked out at the sea of faces. Some she knew, most she didn't, but they were hers now, her people, her responsibility. And for the first time since Theon had walked into that café, Belle felt ready. The feast that followed was magnificent. Music filled the hall, wine flowed freely, and the entire realm seemed to exhale in relief. The dark years were over. A new queen sat on the throne. Belle moved through the celebration, accepting congratulations, making promises, already thinking about the work ahead. Trade agreements to negotiate, alliances to forge, systems to rebuild. But when Theon found her on the balcony overlooking the city, she let herself just be for a moment. Your Majesty, he said with a slight bow. Belle laughed. Don't you start. Can't help it. You look very regal. Theon leaned against the railing beside her. How does it feel? Terrifying, Belle admitted. I have no idea what I'm doing. None of us do. Theon's hand found hers. We just figure it out as we go. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights flicker to life as darkness fell. "I have a proposition," Theon said eventually. Belle raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "An alliance between the northern and southern realms." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Not conquest, not absorption. True partnership. Trade, mutual defense, shared resources." "That's a very practical proposal," Belle said carefully. "It is." Theon turned to face her, his gray eyes intense. "But there's another kind of alliance I'm interested in, a personal one." Belle's breath caught. "Theon, I'm not asking you to decide now," he said quickly. "You've just been crowned. You need time to establish your rule, to prove yourself without anyone whispering that you're my puppet. But Belle," his voice softened, "when you're ready, when the realm is stable and you're confident in your power, I'd like to ask you properly." Belle's heart hammered. "Ask me what?" "To marry me." Theon's smile was tentative, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. Not as king to queen, as man to woman, as equals who choose each other. Tears blurred Belle's vision. "You'd wait? However long it takes?" "I've waited 3 years to find you," Theon said. "I can wait a little longer for you to find yourself." Belle kissed him then, pouring 3 years of loneliness and fear and desperate hope into that single moment. When they broke apart, she was crying and laughing at the same time. "Ask me again in a year," she whispered, "when I've proven I can do this. When I'm not Belle the scared waitress, but Belle the queen." "Deal," Theon murmured against her hair. They stood together on that balcony, the new queen and the southern king, and watched the sun set over a realm that was finally, tentatively, at peace. 1 year later, Belle stood in the great hall wearing a wedding gown of silver and blue. The crown on her head no longer felt foreign. The weight of leadership had become familiar, earned through countless late nights and difficult decisions and small victories. The realm was healing. Trade flourished. The lords respected her. And Belle had learned to respect herself. Theon waited at the altar, resplendent in formal attire, his eyes never leaving her face as she walked down the aisle. Kael stood beside him as witness. Dominic sat in the front row, having earned the Lord's conditional forgiveness and now serving as Belle's chief advisor. When Belle reached Theon, he took her hands and smiled. "Ready?" he asked softly. Belle looked out at the assembled crowd, northern and southern lords together, servants and nobles side by side, the realm united in celebration. "I'm ready," she said. And she was. The ceremony was beautiful, the celebration that followed even more so. But later, when the crowds had dispersed and the candles burned low, Belle found herself back in her father's study. She'd made it hers now, added books, rearranged furniture, filled it with life. But tonight, she pulled out a letter she'd kept hidden. The last one her father had written, the one Theon had given her. "My dearest Belle, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you're alone. I'm so sorry, my darling girl. I tried to protect you, to prepare you, but I fear I left you too soon. But I know you're stronger than you think. You have your mother's heart and my stubbornness. And you have Theon, if he kept his promise to watch over you. Don't hide, Belle. Don't let fear make you small. The world needs your light, even if it takes time to find your way back to it. I love you. Always." Father Belle folded the letter carefully and tucked it away. Then she walked to the window and looked out at the kingdom she'd fought to reclaim. She'd been invisible for 3 years. A waitress serving coffee to people who never saw her. A girl so afraid of being found that she'd almost disappeared completely. But she'd survived. She'd fought. And she'd become someone her father would be proud of. Queen Belle Ashcroft, ruler of the Northern Realm, no longer afraid. And finally, blessedly, home.